Ananda, the question about whether God exists is the most fundamental, certainly perennial question that human beings can ask. Certainly in Western philosophy, theology, this has been a dominant issue. Still is today. What is the Buddhist conception of God?
Let me start with a story. I was asked when the controversy was going on here as to whether you should have in the pledge under one God. I said, how do you react as a Buddhist? I said, personally, I have no objection. But a Buddhist might say, you can put it in the plural. Because Buddhism believes that deities or beings of various levels of development exist. It's connected with the concept of cosmology itself. There are gods, deities, demons, and there are hungry ghosts, and all these possible existence which you do not know, but we take on basis that there is a possibility that this levels of beings exist. And also Buddhism arose in India, which had a polytheistic background. And Buddha had been mentioning about the God theory because he knew something about it. One specific reference that the Buddha has made to God is in relation to say, how do things happen in the world? Mm-hmm. How do we act and all that? He said there are three possible explanations. One can say that this is all happening by accident. And the Buddha says, I reject that. And he says, you could say this all happens because it is retribution or reward for the past, and therefore it is happening, is already predetermined, and predetermination is what causes us. And the Buddha says, no, I don't accept it either. And then he says, the third is to say that this is all created by a God. And he said, I don't accept it either. So he stops by saying negative. He says, the reason for it is this would enable, none of these theories would enable a human being to improve himself, to develop himself, a better person. Because you are given the responsibility to somebody else. You have to take the responsibility. So where the important difference takes place with regard to the concept of Buddhism is God and gods may exist because the existence of supernatural beings is already within the belief system. You see, I used to be telling those days that Buddhism is a religion without dogma. Till a friend of mine pointed out that it is a dogma itself. So, ever since then, I say very clearly, here the Buddha, they say certain things very clearly. He says, what I am not prepared to accept is that everything happens because a God created. I want you to be the creator of your destiny. So the human being taking the responsibility for himself. So some of the recent interpreters of Buddhism has found a very interesting term for it. They say Buddhism has functional atheism as its basis.
Functional atheism.
Functional atheism.
Not metaphysical atheism.
No. Functional, he doesn't play a role in our lives. When tsunami hits our countries, we do not say
God did it.
It was an act of God. You won't sue him. At the same time, we wouldn't say this is because it's entirely something that happened because of accident. We say there must be that the people who suffer may be suffering for some action of their previous lives or present lives for which some kind of moral punishment or moral retribution was due to them. So it is in that context that Buddhism has talked in terms of not placing any kind of functional responsibility either as a creator or as the one who is permanently supervising the human race or something. That kind of the concept is missing in Buddhism.
I understand. That's very interesting. Does leave some questions. It certainly makes our responsibility very personal.
Yes.
I understand that. But what about the initiation of all that exists? Western religions teaches that the God was responsible for the initiation process.
Yeah. Now the Buddha again was a very pragmatic man. He, in one very interesting discourse, he went on asking the people, have your teacher seen the God that they were at that time? Say, the Hindus were believing that all the good things that they did was to go and be absorbed into Brahma or to live in the same called the Brahma Savyata. You know, companionship of the God was what they were aiming at. They say, do you know that God? Did your teacher know? The teacher's teacher know? And they say, you are like a man who says, I love a girl, but you don't know the name of the girl. You have never seen the girl. You don't know the color of the girl. Or you are like a carpenter who's building a staircase and you don't know where the upper floor is coming. So Buddha had that kind of sharp criticism which looks to some people. You know, what happens to some of these texts is if you take a particular text, you can say here is a negation of God in very strong terms by Buddha.
Yeah.
But the Buddha, ultimately what he's trying to get is, how do you know? You cannot know. And we have very interesting parable in which the Buddha asked the Buddhist or the disciple not to worry about the beginnings of things. He said the beginning of existence is something that cannot be even thought of. It is beyond the realm of thought. And if you are trying to do it, you are like a person who is injured with an arrow. Somebody has shot an arrow and the arrow tip is poison and you are dying. And the doctor comes and says, let me remove this arrow and heal you. And the man says, no, find out who shot the arrow, what is the color, what is his height, what is his caste, what is his job, and also find out what wood the arrow is made of, what feathers that are used, what the tip is made of. He said, by the time the doctor goes and finds those answers, the patient will be dead. So he says, we know we have a problem. Let's solve the problem. We take it from here on and go. Going to the so this is what the pragmatism of Buddhism really is based on. See, unknowable is not worth wasting your time over.
So the beginning is unknowable and we can't deal with that.
Yeah.
How about the origin of morality? What is good and what is bad? Western religions would put that on a supreme being.
Buddha would not put it on a supreme being. In fact, one of the questions when he said that the God created everything, he gave the argument that then the God also created all the bad things. Murder was created by him, theft was created by him, sexual misconduct was created by him. Is it possible to give that responsibility to him? And for some reason, whether what evidence the Buddha has, we don't know. But I had a feeling that the people were much more morally sound in their interpersonal relations in earlier times. And as the societies became more and more complex, that little by little, the people start hoarding things. Then the hoarding things opened the way to the theft, and theft ordered the way to crime, and so on. It goes on like that. And if you know, so in social terms, of course, the Buddha had a lot to say about poverty being more a factor of immorality and criminality than anything else.
So at the end of the day, the metaphysical issues of God are one thing, but the functional applications of anything having to do with a God are really irrelevant, that it's all human beings, what we need to do ourselves. Hence the term functional atheism.
Functional atheism.
For Buddhism.
I thought it was a very good way to summarize the Buddhist attitude to God. not a denial, because gods and goddesses are in existence in the Buddhist mind. Apparently, there is a need in everybody's life for belief of that form, because in reality, every Buddhist society created or borrowed a god or gods from other. Now in my country, every Buddhist temple has one or two statues of Hindu gods. So how we combine the two is, we make our offerings to the Buddha, we do a meditation and all that, and we say we gain merit. And we share this merit with the gods, because they are also in search of merit, because they are also in search of enlightenment, and they can of course help us in our material needs. So we have people need God. The Bodhisattva concept of Northern Buddhism has also a similar kind of the requirement that a person has to depend on something supernatural, someone supernatural, is met by a whole pantheon of Bodhisattvas to whom you could pray, from whom you could ask things. So the Buddhists are not completely atheist in that sense. They have a parallel belief system that goes, because the Buddha's own very strict philosophical approach was, you are the master of your destiny. You are your own master is a statement that comes from the Buddha himself. So that is the